In Victorian England, an unwanted child could cost a young mother her future, her family, or even her name. With 40,000 illegitimate births every year, and with no welfare, society turned desperation into a business where women quietly sold or abandoned infants for cash. Most would vanish, and some would never be seen alive again. So how did a legal trade in children flourish for decades, right under the noses of police and the public? Every year in the 1860s, the official records counted nearly 40,000 babies born outside of marriage in England. For their mothers, the consequences were devastating. A single woman with a child faced social exile, instant unemployment, and the threat of permanent separation from her baby. The poor law made no allowances for compassion. Entering a workhouse meant a mother and her infant were split apart, often never to see each other again. Even women from comfortable homes found themselves trapped. A secret pregnancy could destroy a family's standing overnight, leaving the woman with nowhere to turn and no hope of support from relatives or community. Without birth control, and with no government assistance for unmarried mothers, desperation became a daily reality. Newspapers filled with letters from women pleading for help, their words heavy with fear of disgrace and poverty. A letter from 1866 reads, "I would give all I have for my child to be cared for, but I cannot keep her. I beg for secrecy." Behind the statistics stood thousands of women forced to choose between ruin and surrendering their children to strangers. The system offered only hard choices: public shame, lifelong poverty, or the silent loss of a child. This was the world that made baby farming possible, turning private despair into public trade and setting the stage for an industry built on society's refusal to care for its most vulnerable. Advertisements for infant care filled the columns of Victorian newspapers, each line a quiet transaction between desperation and profit. One notice in the Clerkenwell News read, "A respectable married couple wish to adopt a child. Premium £10, no further claim." These offers were not rare. Dozens appeared each week, promising secrecy and a loving home for a price. The business model was as simple as it was deadly. For mothers with no options, a one-time payment of £5 to £15 meant a baby would be taken off their hands, no questions asked. The fee was substantial, several months' wages for a servant, but it bought silence and the hope that a child might survive elsewhere. In reality, a single lump sum created a perverse incentive. Once the money changed hands, every extra day a baby lived cost the farmer more. The quickest profit came from the quickest disappearance. Some, unable to pay up front, arranged weekly fees, 5 to 10 shillings a week. These children clung to life as long as the money kept coming. Payments often stopped after a few weeks, whether due to poverty or a mother's change of heart. When the coins dried up, so did the care. Survival depended on a steady stream of shillings. And even then, most infants received little more than bread, water, and a place to sleep. Before 1872, no law regulated these arrangements. Anyone could advertise as a nurse, collect payments, and vanish with a child. No inspectors called, no paperwork tracked the infants' fates. The market thrived in this legal vacuum, turning secrecy into a commodity and infant lives into a source of income for anyone willing to take the risk. On the afternoon of August 12, 1870, police forced their way into a narrow Brixton house, rented by Margaret Waters. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay and laudanum. 11 infants lay scattered across stained shears and makeshift beds, their bodies wasted, their cries muffled by exhaustion and opium. Waters and her sister, Sarah Ellis, had taken each child for a fee, sometimes as little as £4, sometimes as much as £8, offering mothers a promise of care that ended at the front door. Police found bottles of Godfrey's cordial, an opium syrup sold freely in every chemist, lined up beside crusts of bread and water. Coroner's reports later described the children as starved and drugged, their tiny bodies showing signs of long-term neglect. 5 infants had already died before the raid, their deaths quietly recorded as convulsions or wasting. The truth was plain in the evidence. Silence bought with poison, profit secured by starvation. Waters was arrested on the spot. Her Old Bailey trial drew headlines across England. Witnesses described payments made in secret, infants handed over in back alleys, and the daily dosing routine that kept babies quiet until their bodies failed. The jury found her guilty of murder. On October 11, 1870, Margaret Waters was hanged at Horsemonger Lane Gaol, the first baby farmer in Britain to face execution for the deaths of children. Her case sent shockwaves through Victorian society, exposing the deadly consequences of a trade that had until then been hidden in plain sight. Amelia Dyer entered the trade with a nurse's training and a cold understanding of opportunity. She began in Bristol in 1869, placing advertisements under names like Anne Harding and Mary Baker, offering to care for infants in exchange for cash. Her rooms shifted from city to city, Bristol, Reading, Cotham, each address a fresh start, each alias a disguise to keep authorities at bay. Payments ranged from £12 to £25 per child, a fortune for a few weeks' work. In her first decade, at least 6 infants died under her watch, their deaths quietly attributed to wasting or convulsions in local records. In 1879, Dyer's methods caught up with her. A neglected baby was found in her care, leading to her first arrest. The court handed down a 6-month sentence of hard labor, but the charge was only neglect, not murder. The law required no registration, no inspection, just a promise on paper and a different name in the next town. After her release, Dyer adapted. She learned to move before suspicion could settle, slipping across district lines whenever rumors began. She refined her process, responding to mothers' ads with handwritten letters, arranging secret meetings, and collecting payment in advance. The infants vanished, their fates unrecorded. Dyer's network of false identities and frequent relocations left little trace for police or inspectors. The 1872 Infant Life Protection Act, passed after the Waters scandal, demanded only voluntary registration, a loophole. Dyer exploited for years. Each new address meant a reset. Each new alias bought time. The system's gaps allowed her to expand her business and her crimes, undetected and unchallenged. The 1872 Infant Life Protection Act arrived with promises of reform, but its reach barely skimmed the surface. Registration was voluntary and easy to sidestep. Baby farmers simply moved to a new district or changed their names, leaving authorities powerless to track children or enforce standards. Inspectors, when appointed, needed warrants to enter homes and could only act on complaints. Penalties for violations rarely exceeded a small fine. For over 2 decades, these loopholes allowed the trade to continue, almost unchanged. It was not until the public horror over Amelia Dyer's crimes in 1896 that Parliament responded with real force. The 1897 Act made registration mandatory for anyone receiving infants, empowered inspectors to enter homes without warning, and set far steeper penalties for concealment or neglect. Over the next 30 years, these changes finally began to cut the number of infant deaths, though the damage had already spanned a generation. Historical investigations estimated that as many as 80 to 90% of infants entrusted to baby farms never survived. Most died quietly, their deaths explained away as natural by coroners who rarely questioned the cause. For those who lived, survival brought its own hardships. Some children were sold as servants before they could even speak. Others were handed off to childless couples for a fee, stripped of their names and histories. Many vanished into workhouses, their identities erased by a system that treated them as burdens. Mothers who paid for care often received no word of their children's fate, left with only silence and unanswered letters. The real tragedy lay not only in individual cruelty, but in a society that allowed these losses to go uncounted and unchallenged. Even now, the way society values the most vulnerable determines who is protected and who is forgotten. When laws fail to see every child, history repeats its cruelties in new forms. Today, our silence still costs lives. What will we tolerate in the shadows? Share your thoughts below.